Right, all right, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, madame et messieurs. If we can begin gathering back, we're going to start up with our closing panel soon. And by the way, before you go take your seats, okay, we've got our 4 panelists who are going to be up here, right? There is no good way to position them without somebody's view getting blocked by this pole. We have all these seats right here. I please encourage people to come on up. Our panelists are very nice people. We are very nice people. At least I'd like to think we are. Please come on up, especially if your view is obstructed. Join us up front here. All right. While we are waiting for that, I think I've got one more giveaway. And by waiting for that, I mean waiting for a few more people just to kind of grab their seats. We have a giveaway, I believe it's from Just in Mind, which is another prototyping tool. There are a lot of prototyping tools out there. And the name I got here is Susanna Zlotnikov. All right, winner. Oh, you weren't listening? Oh, then you don't win. No, you win anyway. It's a license to Just in Mind, a prototyping tool. So, all right. I'll make sure I have your email down there. You're good. Okay. So we're going to wrap things up here. We've covered a lot of ground. We've gone high and low, and we're going to wrap up with this closing panel. Let me introduce our closing panelists to you. First of all, we have Francine Gemperle. Francine is the Director of Human Sciences at Maya Design, where Francine collaborates with teams and clients to bring human experiences to the forefront of their design work on innovative technologies. She's an expert in human-centered design methods and their application in a variety of complex situations for Maya's healthcare, military, and industrial clients. On the far end, we've got Jack. Where's Jack's bio? There's Jack. So Jack has been designing web, desktop, and mobile applications for over 15 years, and he has been teaching part-time for a decade at WVU. As a manager at Inmedius, which is a Boeing company, Jack directs a small team performing everything from initial user research to front-end implementation and testing. He's also the author of Bridging UX and Web Development, co-founded IXDA Pittsburgh, and he writes about design on designaday.tumblr.com. And if I had to take my guess of which of our panelists was on Tumblr, it was not going to be Jack. But there you have it. Sorry, Jack. All right, next to Jack, we've got Kate Daly, an Agile Experience Manager and Workshop Facilitator at the digital experience agency SiteWorks. As an active speaker and blogger, Kate explores the intersections between software development, UX, IA, workplace culture, the Agile mindset, and technical debt. Kate was a 2015 contributor to the Pastry Box project, and you can read her writing on Medium. Check her out on her website, Kate Daly, that's with a .ly at the end, and follow her tweets at Tiki Kate. And we also have, closest to me here, Laura Ballay. Laura currently serves as the director for the Masters in Human-Computer Interaction program at Carnegie Mellon. She's a seasoned design leader with experience managing creative teams and delivering well-crafted user experiences for digital products. Her deep expertise spans a variety of industries and domains, including web applications, gaming, banking, voice user interfaces, e-commerce, and mobile. So that's who we've got on our panel. Give them a round of applause for their participation before we get started. Let me find the second mic. Where's the second handheld mic? Oh, it was hiding. All right, so we'll pass that around.
Talking first?
Maybe. We'll see what the question is, and then we'll ask. All right.
Softball.
So to kick us off, we've been talking all day about information architecture, and it's kind of hard not to talk about IA without also talking about its relationship to UX. Peter Merholtz, I remember, he wrote a somewhat controversial blog post where he essentially said that the game was over, that UX had swallowed IA, that was it. And a lot of people were debating on this. So what I want to, and all of you have been in, as we just read from your bios, doing software development and design for a very long time. So what I just want to start off our panel here is with the question of what you make of where IA finds itself today with relation to UX.
Sure, go ahead. Okay, I'll take a step.
I want to say that where I work, when we design sites, there's a marriage between UX and IA, but the information architects are really starting to emerge as the experts when it comes to data management, more than the design of the site. Anymore, it's not just what your sitemap is going to look like, or where you're going to find things from the homepage, but how your product data is going to be organized, and the hierarchy of your product data is going to really make or break your e-commerce site, and whether or not you can enhance your data properly and also manage and govern it. So I've seen a true rise of that skill set on that like back end level, and not as much in the forefront as we used to think it was. Thank you for nodding. Yeah. Cool, cool.
Okay, now I'm ready. So I missed your definition of IA at the beginning, but I'm one of those people. You both mentioned about how we used to argue about what exactly IA is. I'm one of those people who learned to do IA and did it professionally outside of UX and UI design work. So I did it for the design of experiences and services, things that were not necessarily digital but came down to human-human connections. And so the notion that UX could swallow IA is kind of laughable, because architecting and organizing information is something that preceded digital user interfaces as a thing, and it's something that continues to need to exist in the world, whether or not there's a digital implementation. Okay, now argue.
Well, Francine, I guess my take on it is, for me, I've never really had a strong overlap between user experience and digital. I always saw them as one application of user experience could be towards digital products and technology, but that's not the only way it can manifest itself. Probably a little bit of a heresy to say at an IA get-together, but for me, the name of what you want to call that activity is somewhat secondary to the activity itself. So if you want to call it IA, great. If you want to call it something else, if you want to put it below something or parallel, for me, it's really the activity and the process itself that matters. So maybe I'm not the best person to express my opinion on the topic.
Sorry, Francine, did you have a, oh, you're going to pass it to
Pass
Jack?
it to Jack.
Yeah, and as it's getting passed, one of the other questions that's kind of very related to that we weren't sure whether it was a separate question, was this issue of what we call ourselves, right? So, I mean, how many people here call themselves information architects in their job titles? Right? So, I mean, I sometimes do, but sometimes you go to that cocktail party and you're like, I'm an information architect. And it's like, what? It's bad enough to explain what you are as a UX person or sometimes a human-centered designer, right? So.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's like every year something else is trying to take over or swallow up something else, right? And we had the UPA who became the UXPA, and there was the big hullabaloo, oh, they're trying to own UX, oh no! And there was the big fight between IAI and IXDA a few years back, and it just, nobody needs to own anything. We're all doing the same stuff. You know, and there was even, I forget if it was Jesse James Garrett or who gave the keynote at the Architecture Summit a couple years ago and said that, you know, there is no IA, there is no IXDA, we're all, did he say we're all UX people?
He was all, he was that we are all just UX.
Yeah, so, you know, everybody has their own viewpoint on it. But yeah, what it comes down to is, what do you do in your job every day? I consider myself an interaction designer, but I recognize that information architecture is a very, very important part of what I do in my job. So, you know, I think part of his point in that talk was that, you know, if your company hires an interaction designer, they probably don't also hire an information architect, and vice versa, that we end up doing the same job. But we all have our own specialty and our own origin point and perspective on the work we do. And I think that's where these different disciplines sort of come from.
All right. So for our next question, to think about for some of the people in the room that maybe haven't been around information architecture and seen this history and stuff, you know, what are the attributes that maybe to sort of go after Raylan's and Ashley's talk, what are the attributes that help someone as an IA and also that we look for and that we try to educate for? And what do you look for when you're looking to hire someone? And that doesn't have to just be a personality attribute, but it could be experience attribute too.
I would say curiosity and someone who is willing to take a walk in the woods and find out what's going to happen there.
Oh my.
Yes. But I think, you know, I was thinking earlier about the rise of the generalist. And we say it's like all the same. For me, the lines are so blurred anymore. There's the generalist specialist, not the specialist anymore. And, you know, if I were looking to hire, honestly, I would want a librarian more than anything. Somebody who can organize things into systems, maybe more than somebody straight off of a computer science degree. But that could be unpopular, I don't know.
I think one of the things I look for that I think they pointed out was a sort of fearlessness about putting the first stake in the ground, even though you know it's going to be wrong, and putting it in front of people to share and get feedback. Like, you cannot hold back until you have it right, because you will not get anywhere. So I always am looking for that capability. And when I'm interviewing and hiring people, they're not necessarily professional designers who have perfect Photoshop skills, but they can't be afraid to knock something out that is visual, even if it's not going to be perfect.
So, no, go ahead, Laura, but then I also want to particularly follow up with you there.
I think to add on to the curiosity and the fearlessness is that constant need to question why, because so often people are content to just see the facts in front of them and not dig deeper and really understand what's happening behind the scenes. And without that, you can make decisions that might not be the best informed decisions.
So what listening to all those answers makes me think about is what the upshot really is when you get into the classroom, right? So particularly I was kind of looking toward you because of, you know, you being at the master's program in HCI at Carnegie Mellon, and whether, you know, talking about the need to have people come in, right? We're talking about the importance of making sense of the messes in our world, and this is, you know, valuable things that we need people to do. Is it a matter of, you know, diffusing that through all the design education to make sure people are coming out, you know, with these skills? Is it, you know, there needs to be more information architecture 101 classes, or, you know, just kind of how that really manifests itself in kind of a concrete way in the way we're kind of educating this next generation of designers and IAs and just human-centered design thinkers?
I guess the quick way to answer that is often where the interest lies is around the tools and the methods. It's the how you do something. And this kind of builds off of the why part I was talking about. I think a lot of times whenever you go into those meetings with a client, it's not so much about how you solve the problem or, you know, the pixel perfectness of it. It's about the thinking that went into it and then finding what's going to resonate with that other individual or set of individuals in the room with you, and getting that communication, those channels open and clear. And someone, I don't remember who, earlier today was talking about how this all kind of boils down to communication, and I think that's a really key part to the education piece in particular.
Anybody else want to talk education?
I will, because I was an English major, and I work in computer science, and it's been hard because I'm always a fish out of water. But it's because I have a liberal arts degree that I feel that I can be a Jane of all trades. And honestly, I'm a huge advocate for liberal arts education and English majors. And my parents are very glad I'm not a barista. And I can't, and I don't, and there's nothing wrong with being a barista. But because you're also a poet when you're a barista, and you're also a reader and an artist. And, you know, coming from that background has made me a better computer scientist than a lot of the folks who coded for 4 years. So,
I make sure my students understand that they aren't done learning when they get their degree, right? that there's so much that they still don't know, and that they're going to continue learning as they're on their job. And so that's what I expect of the people I manage. But to get back to the sort of the original question, I look at it very practically. So it's one of those big depends things. What skills do I need that my team doesn't currently have? What skills are going to best help my team do a better job? Right now, I have a very, very small team. It's a team of 3, including me. So I need all of us to be able to do everything. And so that's what I expect. So we all code HTML and CSS, and we all do graphic design work, and we all do information architecture of the navigation and so forth, and we all do it all, so we can all step in and do what's needed when it's needed. But that's the situation that we're in.
Wanted to add, because I think the world is going to change a lot in the next 10 to 15 years with regard to design and information architecture. My kindergartner, that exercise that Raylyn mentioned at the beginning, where she brought the bucket of tools and they organized them, my kindergartner did that. And then they did it again in first grade in a different way. So that's not master's level design education anymore. That's foundational core competency for understanding the world around you and bringing order. So next question.
All right. So speaking of learning things, I feel like personally, I think Agile and Lean, there's a lot of things that we're all sort of struggling to learn how to work in those environments and do better or worse at times. And I feel like, at least for me in particular, IA is something that I particularly struggle to fit in those kind of situations. So I was wondering if any of you have any thoughts or tips on how to work in development teams in situations where the tempo is fast and you may not have all the time in the world that you might like to have. Not that that ever really happens.
I have an aside on that question, which is there's also this piece of it where if you do really good information architecture work, the experts in that domain, they look at it and they go, well, yeah, obviously.
Right.
And it's so easy for them to overlook the power of what you have done of making visible and shared something that was in everyone's head. But I would say for speed, it's rapid iteration right along with them, right? And getting everybody on board with the idea that things are going to have to continue to change. You want to add to that?
No, but we do that. You mentioned Agile and Lean and this, the rapid iteration. Sorry. But what we've done to solve that on ours is that we have the folks who are working with the data structure and the IA and the UX and the design actually working on a separate but parallel track to the design or to the developers, and they use a Kanban process that limits work in progress that goes from collecting all of the acceptance criteria and business requirements to lo-fi wireframes and sketches to hi-fi code designs in the browser, and then UX testing, and then it goes to the dev team. So they're constantly doing the Kanban work, whereas the devs are. Okay, I have some cards. We'll talk. Hey. But what it does is it frees up the design team to do what they need to and iterate as much as needed within reason. You know what I mean? But they're not beholden to the same sprint schedule that our developers are.
So you mentioned like in particular limiting the work in progress, and I'm wondering, you said that like it was key, and I feel like I haven't heard that very often.
Yeah, Kanban, the principle of it is that you as a team agree how many items will be in progress in any one state at any one time. So you don't have like a huge bottleneck of stuff that needs to have lo-fi sketches. Yeah. Yeah, but as a team, you have to say, okay, we're a team of 5. We can only have 5 items in progress at any point. So, but yeah, I'd love to talk more about that too.
And Jack, I don't know if you had something you already wanted to say to this, but I guess I'm also particularly curious to hear from you because of when we talk about getting into lean and agile and how it fits in, we also invariably end up talking about documentation to some extent. And I know that's your thing. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about documentation and IA and the way that kind of weaves into what we're talking about here.
Yeah, actually, documentation's probably one of the areas where I use IA the most in my job because, well, I work for Boeing, okay? I work for a very, very large company. I work with very, very large amounts of data and big problems and military and all kinds of stuff, and documentation. It has to be there, and it has to be right. It's contractual, right? I can't go this lean UX. The product is the documentation. That doesn't work. Not in my situation. So yeah, documentation to me is very, very, very important. From not just the initial spec and communicating that to a developer, but then after that, it goes on to testing, because our testers are in India, and they have to have documentation that they're saying, oh yeah, it's supposed to work like this, right? And then going on to the customer, my documentation is something that my customer saw it once and they said, yeah, we want that as a deliverable, right? And it became a contractual deliverable. So it's extremely important, and yes, that's what I'm speaking about at Interaction 16. So, but was there more to the question than that? Okay.
For me, if it works for you.
At Maya, we're often in the situation where we have a client who has a website or a web presence, and it was built 10 or 15 or 18 years ago. And maybe they did documentation, maybe not, who knows, but it's so long ago, and all those people are gone, and we are the information archaeologists in order to come in and figure out what exists and what needs to live on. There's this huge archaeology problem that we have to do. Now, had they been as diligent as Jack and his team, perhaps the organization could have saved a little bit of change on that effort.
On a sort of tangent to that, but I know sort of working in-house versus working as for clients, documentation can play a kind of different role in that it sort of helps show your value. Is there anything you might want to share about that with the client? I mean, with us. Does that make sense?
So one of the things we're kind of always touching on here is making a place for IA and kind of selling IA. And as we also talk about documentation, I think what you're talking about is, right, it's also not a chance just for internally, but also with clients often. And maybe some of your clients are internal, to kind of get them sold on the idea that this is important, this is worth taking the time on. Is that what you were, is it? So I guess if there's just any thoughts on documentation also playing that role and kind of how we sell information architecture and the value of it, and putting that work aside to all sorts of stakeholders, internal, external, teamwork, teammates even.
So real-time documentation is like an argument settler, and it's a way to prevent stupid conversations from happening over and over again, because you have in line the explanation for why things are the way they are, and how the decision was made, and which senior executive made that decision. And so then, like, oh my God, we don't need to talk about it anymore. We can move to the next problem, because there's plenty.
Yeah, I was just gonna nod my head in appreciation. I like to think of documentation sometimes as a CYA sort of a thing. Even if they don't ask for it, they're going to get it anyway, because I like to have my notes, and I like it to have sort of a life that extends beyond my tenure with that particular contract or company.
Well, and actually, this is going to go right to you, Laura. So this came up, I forget, at the beginning of our panel even, right? The definition of information architecture that we had during the opening deck, which is a practice dedicated to bring understanding and order to the chaos that is the information that we produce in our everyday lives, right? So I think you know where I'm going with this now. Before we convene this panel, we were just talking about some of the talks on the day, and Laura brought up the idea of feeling as she was listening to some of these talks, you know, being reminded that sometimes there can be, as you put it, beauty in the chaos, right? Does everything need to be architected?
My simple answer is no. I really am a big fan of the spontaneity of things, things that happen organically, and I feel like there's a place for that in our everyday lives and with information. And I think you see it really apparent, especially whenever you think about curated feeds, for example. You find that your field of vision gets more and more narrow the more and more architected that experience becomes. So I like to keep in mind that there's always a time and place for serendipitous discovery and adventures and things like that, that if it was over-architected, might not happen. And understanding that kind of a context and the importance of it should be something that we should always keep at the forefront of our minds.
It's interesting because I think it comes down to what are you architecting? We had talked, because I thought Jonathan Morgan's talk got very close to starting to architect human experience. Wow, there's a really big, huge thing to try to bring order to. And he didn't quite say that, right? So but somewhere between my notes and the slides, I was like, wait, is this what he's talking about? And Laura's point was, no, hey, don't try to bring order to the whole entire world. But when you think about information, and I think, Jack, the kind of detailed technical information, you can't have chaos in that space. That information has to be architected, otherwise planes don't keep flying, right?
Yeah, and I think just when we had pre-gamed over there talking about that, and back to Jonathan's talk, I thought about, you know, the difference between architecting an experience and trying to digitize a real life experience, and I think that sometimes our tendency is to assume that we have to digitize everything, and one of the things that I try to practice with my teams is the concierge model. When you have an idea for an experience, replicate it in real life. Try to do it in real life before you try to do it digitally. You know, from a transaction or, you know, some kind of, you know, information sharing of some kind. And it's interesting when you do that because you learn more. First of all, you learn the risks or what could go wrong in that situation. And then you also are able to see how technology can make it smoother at the same time. So
Yeah, I think we have to remember that whether it's digital or whether it's the cowboy hat guy, I'm looking back at Mark, everything we do, we're doing it for people, right? I design computer software that is a tool that is used by authors who write technical manuals that are then used by mechanics who repair airplanes, right? So that the airplanes are safe, so that people are safe when they're flying, right? That's the kind of impact that my work has on the world, right? And that's the kind of that's how I get satisfaction from it. It's not that I've architected this really great information structure or done this really cool UI. It's that, you know, there are guys out there that are trying to clear minefields that because they're using my software, maybe they don't lose a leg, right? I mean, that's where I draw my satisfaction from in the work I do. It's very, very human.
on this because I think he really touched a nerve when he said that, because I think that it goes back to the professionalism of what we're doing. My father's a mechanical engineer, and when he makes decisions, when he makes his engineering decisions, what happens after that bridge is built, will depend on whether or not it can hold the trucks that my dad said it could hold. And I think that part of what we're doing in our industry is that, there's a lot of people going around calling themselves engineers, but, the professionalism that you're speaking of and the importance of it and the true life or deathness of it is something that I think we forget. And, a mutual friend of Heather and I once said, nobody dies if I choose the wrong blue. But somebody could die if you choose the wrong structure.
I don't. Next question, please.
That was pretty heavy. That made me feel, I don't know, I just have feelings about that member portal I was working on now, and I don't know what they are. So, do you have?
There might be the wrong blue.
All right. So before we touch on another question, do you want to give a chance to anybody sitting behind us if there's a question for the panel that somebody would like to ask? Going once. All right, we got Ashley in the back. So I'll walk this back to you. I'll jog it.
So Mark's talk made me think about this. I think it's a common issue, especially for UX or IA practitioners in large organizations. How do we scale our skill set? And I don't mean how do we scale the teams. I mean how do we allow others that we're working with or technology teams to do the kind of work that we do and do it in an intentional way. I'm open to any ideas. I know that's very general.
I'll answer briefly. I think that we step into leadership positions and we teach and mentor it across organizations rather than keeping it pigeonholed.
So this ties back into the question earlier about agile. What I found really effective when I was a part of a really small UX team and was vastly outnumbered by developers and QA and all of that, was designs is kind of a universal language, and there's so many people who are intrigued and interested in it. And it's very easy to get them to walk alongside you and almost shadow you in the pursuit of design, and you just have to find the right bait, I don't know, the right way to kind of entice them to come on board. And you're going to have people who are going to support you, help you spread the word, and learn some of these skills and help you grow that sort of effort within an organization.
Be inclusive. Invite the other members of your teams, be they developers or salespeople or product managers or whatever, to participate in your design, quote unquote, design activities. Our lead developers have been sitting in on the focus groups we've been doing recently. We try to bring developers in when we're doing UI critiques, right? And so we're trying to spread the culture of design practice, if you will, by just allowing other people to experience it.
All right, we have another question in the back.
Hi. What role does accessibility come into play with information architecture for you?
Did everyone get that? What role accessibility comes into play with IA to you?
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah. Okay. So accessibility is critically important for anything that you're designing. You're like exactly behind the pole, too. Thank you. It's important for everything that you're designing, and I think good design work gets probably 75 to 80% of the way towards accessibility. And when we're architecting information, we have to get back into, okay, how can we measure accessibility to get to, we work with organizations that need to be compliant with the government's rules for accessibility. So we use good design to get most of the way there, and then we back into it later on.
I think this plays into Smitha's, am I saying your name correctly? Smitha, to Smitha's presentation, because when, you know, we need to almost consider that as a separate culture, a separate way to experience the world. And it cannot be just hover text. It can't just be, you know, some, you know, a proxy for what all of the people with all of their senses experience. There has to be a different way to deliver the information that is sensitive to how that information is consumed, whether it's spoken text or even the different, or even something arranged differently for how that person would experience the world.
All right. So shifting gears to a different question. One of the things that kind of stood out to me is not quite thematic, but we heard from Alden and Lissa about, Dugo mapping, this tool they picked up and even evolved to kind of have it meet their needs as they were trying to grapple with what they were grappling with. And we also saw Barb talking about how she was, kind of going to butcher paper and figuring some things out that didn't come from a book, that came from a necessity as she's trying to, communicate and design. And Jonathan, of course, also talked about, his 2-hour exercise and what they were trying to do to kind of grasp at the problems they were dealing with. And so this, again, semi-theme of tools and building new tools and adapting old tools and finding where the old tools don't work anymore. Maybe our tools have just always been in evolution and in flux, but I also kind of wonder whether it's a sign that the complexity has just reached such a point, kind of a breaking point, that a lot of our old tools just are not serving us the way they used to. And so first of all, I'd just be curious to hear if any of you are finding this kind of in your practices, in your work, the nature of the tools holding up under the weight of modern complexity. And then kind of building off of that, what we can do to encourage what our speakers were doing. What can we do to encourage, venturing out to trying new things, doing new methods, trying new tools, and finding something that's going to work for the problems at hand.
That's another thing I look for when I'm hiring. Inventiveness with tools. Can you take the existing tools and take a leap to get to a problem solution for a particular situation? I think that the fact that tools for designers have been exploding, especially in recent years with lots of smaller apps existing, is wonderful. I think it's a sign of a maturity of the discipline, and I think that the idea of there being one standard tool that we all use is old and not necessarily that useful for us anymore. So I think it's great. More tools.
I also really loved and appreciated how many of the hacks, we'll say, to these tools and methods involved analog activities. Paper, pen, notebooks, butcher paper. They can be really powerful too, and sometimes we lose sight of that, especially with all these bright, shiny new objects. I love to see that hybrid between them and modifications whenever it makes sense.
Make it harder to teach, though, right? I teach a research methods class, and I have 7 weeks. There's not enough time to cover all of the methods and tools out there.
I was just going to ask what the definition of tool was. Or is it process, or is it tool, or is it app, or is it it's like almost a research methodology. Yeah. I use, when it comes to tools for some of the story mapping work that I do, I use traditional 3x3 Post-its and the fat Sharpies, and I say that these are purposefully chosen because you can only write a limited number of words with that type of Sharpie on that size piece of paper. So when it comes to tools, that's where I guess I live very much in the analog world with what I've done. I mean, eventually it all ends up in a spreadsheet, but you know, but that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I don't know. Has it gotten any more complicated? I mean, yeah, we have more tools, but aren't we still doing the same kind of work and solving the same kind of problems? So I think it just comes down to, you know, for the job you're doing at the moment, what are the tools you have, and what tools are available that might help you do it better. So I'm always evaluating new tools, but I guess I'm an old dog now at this point. I'm still using Photoshop to do UI mock-ups.
Any more from the audience? All right, well, I'll try to make one up here as maybe a kind of a wrap-up question. During Jonathan's talk, he had that quote. Oh, we're kicked out again. The lights. So during Jonathan's talk, he had that quote on the board about the board. What board? You know what I mean. He had that quote up about the most powerful technologies being the invisible technologies, and that immediately reminded me of a quote that Abby Covert in her book, How to Make Sense of Any Mess, she essentially says that nobody ever said, hey, nice IA, right? So we're talking about this thing that is so important and valuable and powerful, and it's invisible. And I'm trying to figure out where the question really goes here, except to say that really struck me, and I guess what I wonder is for some thoughts on, you know, so as we go forward from this event, right? We're all here. We all, you know, got here because we agreed, again, making sense of at least some of the chaos in our lives is a valuable thing to do, and what we can do to better, I don't know, bring visibility to that. And Francine, you mentioned that too, right? Like these people, you do that work, and then people go, well, duh, right? Because when you do it well, it seems a little bit natural, and just maybe the question is just really how we go forward into that. Or maybe Becky's gonna.
So I don't know if this is the greatest place to end or not either, but do you have technologies and things that you're working on that you're excited to become invisible or make invisible as you go forward? Both.
I was enjoying the performance piece in the background as the lights turn on and off and everybody's going like this. Making things invisible isn't what I consider to be one of my goals.
Well, I can't quote it directly, but you guys remember Serious Pony a while ago? And I know that she's been gone from Twitter and from the public eye for a while, but she had an article about public speaking where she said that, you know, you want to become the experience so much that people don't notice it. You don't want to be, you know, when she was thinking about speaking, someone who's uncomfortable speaking makes the audience uncomfortable. And an uncomfortable design makes the user uncomfortable. So you want it to be seamless and transparent in that way. And I guess, you know, no one ever said nice IA. Of course, I'm thinking of the joke. My IA is up here, boys. But I should have just tweeted that, not said it in front of the crowd. But nonetheless, you don't want it to be something you think of. You know, like when they redesign a giant eagle, and it's terrible because they put like the mixers in a different row from the pop. Like, you know what I mean? And all you do is think about where to find things when you're there. And the old giant eagle wasn't necessarily better. Maybe you just had it memorized. But, you know, it's things like that seem logical that you don't even think about. You don't think about where stuff is if it's where you expect it to be.
Jeremy, were you asking if we should be marketing IA so that we get more like, is that what you wanted to think about?
I don't know, but that's a good question.
Do we want, I mean, do we want more people doing this? Do we want this to be recognized? Do we want a future where someone says, ooh, this giant eagle has a great IA?
I guess let me rephrase this. Is it important that information architecture becomes household more? It's never probably going to be maybe households, maybe to overstate it, but is it important at all that what we're talking about here becomes at least more household than it is today? Is that important? Or as long as we're doing the job in the background, as long as it's that window pane that maybe nobody sees but you can see clearly through it, is that enough?
So I will take a stance and say I think it is important, because I think the amount of information in the world is exploding and it's going to continue to double. I can't remember which speaker was talking about the amount of information they have. Oh, it was the first guy, Rasu. Yeah, that's going to expand exponentially. And so we're going to need a whole lot more people doing information architecture in order to make the world work, or chaos.
I have a question for you guys. How much of your time, well, let's say, is more than 30% of your time spent convincing others about the value of your work? And I would say if that's the case, then there is definitely a case to be made for marketing it. Because why should we spend 30+% of our time doing that when instead we could be solving the problem? It's great to bring people on board and have them be part of the process, but at the end of the day, do you want to be doing the same sales pitch over and over year after year? And that's my case for marketing it better.
On that note, I think that's a good note to end on. All right. Thank you to our closing panel. All right, so I'm going to be super brief in, if you even want to consider these closing remarks. Let me pull this up here. All right. Okay, that is a wrap. So again, thank yous must go to all of our speakers, to all of the people, the staff here at UPMC. Tanasha, please raise your hand. That's Tanasha back there. She was helping us make sure that we were all set up for all audiovisual stuff, and her other collaborators here were helping us make sure with the space. It's just been fantastic. Again, to the guys from Work Hard Pittsburgh and Academy PGH running our AV and doing the live stream today. Oh, thank you. So a quick housekeeping note before I go back to this is that, like I said, our mantra was better to have more food than too little, which means you can see over there we have sandwiches left over and salads, which they just haven't been sitting there. They were refrigerated between then and now, so they haven't gone bad. So if you're heading home or wherever you're going, please feel free to take one of those. If you don't want to go home right away, a number of us, at least I plan on going down to Social because I need a drink. So Social is literally just right downstairs. It's a restaurant, and they've got some good food and some good beer and other options. So it's not official. I'm not paying for any of you. But like, if you want to come join us and hang out, please, let's continue that kind of camaraderie. Because if you ask me, and this is something we talked about, you know, really from the start, was like, well, how do we consider this event a success? And for us, in many ways, this was about kind of sending up a flare, right? So Midwest UX was here in October. Really kind of a all hands on deck effort, you know, to kind of get the UX community here in a way that hasn't happened before as it continues to grow exponentially. And so even within that, though, sometimes, you know, you start talking about this niche, information architecture, and you don't know. You're kind of in your own little trench, and you're like, all right, I get this stuff, and I find it interesting, and I'm a nerd for it, but is anybody else, right? So now the flare has been sent up. You're all here. If nothing else, if you met one other person you can kind of nerd out with and talk to, and like, you know, whether it's on Twitter or you'll meet up for coffee, doesn't matter. As long as you've met that person, you've connected. To me, at least, and I think I can hopefully speak for my co-organizer in this sense, that makes this event a success. So going down to social is not just, hey, let's go for drinks. Although, yes, like I said, I need that drink. It is very much, this is about community, right? This is about community and connection. So again, a big thank you to all of you for just coming out and participating and being here.
And briefly, a huge thank you to Jeremy for thinking of doing it and for organizing it. Woo!
Thank you, Carol. So the note I want to end on is what's next and looking ahead. To take what we're talking about, learning about here, and carry it forward. So if you really want to nerd out on information architecture, there is the granddaddy of all IA events, which is the Information Architecture Summit. Like I said, World IA Day has been happening now for about 5 years. The IA Summit has I think, 17-year history. This might be their 17th year, and they're down in Atlanta in May. One of the other perks coming out of this event is that everybody here will have a $50 discount code for IA Summit registration if you're interested. I'll be there as an attendee. Becky Torbochkin will be there as a speaker. So we're going to have some Pittsburgh representation if you'd like that. IXDA, the local Interaction Design Association, continues to plan events in kind of the, building on that momentum for Midwest UX. Jack Moffett, who you just saw up on the panel, is, what's your title these days? You the president? Co-chair of the IXDA. And there are a bunch of other people here who are also involved with the IXDA. And they are always looking for speakers, looking for event possibilities, and also just looking for you to come out and get involved and attend. And we will be sure to share out their newsletter, which you can sign out for. You can also find them on Twitter. There's UX Pittsburgh, a meetup group. We'll send out their information. They're also, again, looking for speakers if you're looking for an opportunity to share something that's going on. Refresh, another great event. They're back in the swing of things, looks like, holding semi-regular events. In fact, I think they have one on the 24th coming up over on the north side. Also, a little bit of a different flavor of event, but definitely an opportunity to take this sense-making thinking and these skills and this practice and to put it towards something is Startup Weekend. So Startup Weekend Pittsburgh is a entrepreneurial competition that brings together business people and designers and developers. And coming up, what date is that, Jackie? March 18th through the 20th, we have Startup Weekend Pittsburgh Women's Edition, which is not just for women's attendees. It's going to be a very diverse group of people coming out. Yeah, Startup Weekend's been going on for about 5 years now or so, and it's really just a fantastic event. And Jackie, if you can just stand up a second. Jackie's one of the co-organizers of it, and would highly recommend for you to check that out as well. Okay. There's, coming up in the summer, Code and Supply is organizing this massive conference. I don't know where this thing came from, but it's called Abstractions. I think they're planning for like 1,500 attendees down at the convention center. And on a design-related note, so it's a software development conference, but on a design-related note, they're going to have some really heavy hitters on the design side speaking. So definitely check that out as well as an opportunity to engage with the community. They are also looking for local people to present, and they're looking for people to nominate other local speakers to get involved. So we'll send out that information. And last but not least, it's never too early to look ahead to World IA Day 2017. I'll just say that if you had a good time here and if you took something away from this and you're interested in seeing this happen again, please see me. I'm not quite sure what shape it'll take next year. This is an international event, but it has the ultimate local organizing power. It could be this next year. It could be a full-day workshop. It could be us having a pizza party and we just sit around and we recap the IA Summit. Like, it could be whatever we want it to be because this is our community event. So maybe it's that. Maybe it gets involved with the IXDA. I don't know. But if you want to see this happen again, please say so and let's talk. So I think that might be everything I have. Officially, yes, that's everything I have. So again, thank you for coming out, and hope to see some of you down at Social.